Yes, good afternoon, and thank you everyone for being here, and thank you to the CFS for bringing us this forum. We are at a critical moment in time. Our technological advances have a potential to create an equitable, just world and make the lives of millions of people better. However, the implementation of artificial intelligence, digitalization, and data-driven technologies in the context of our food system is taking place at a very quick pace with very little oversight or consideration of their true social and environmental costs. This is a time to question the role of these technologies in our food system rather than accepting them as inevitable. On my flight here to Rome from the United States, someone in front of me on the airplane was watching a movie. It was Jurassic Park. That was the one where scientists were able to bring back the dinosaur. It was fiction, of course, and the movie did not end well, but it reminded me that even though we have technologies or science to develop technologies, it doesn't always mean that we should. So I think this is especially true when it comes to biotechnology that is altering the basics of life itself. The CSIPM, Civil Society and Indigenous Peoples Mechanism, our position is clear. We firmly believe that we need strong and binding governance frameworks with provisions for corporate accountability and for the dismantling of political and economic power structures of our current system. We need full assessment of digital technologies already in use and those emerging technologies. Is their use warranted, or are their risks too great? We need a halt or a moratorium, as mentioned earlier today, to new technological infrastructures until governance mechanisms are in place. And we need to support alternatives like agroecology and farmer-owned and farmer-led technologies that takes us beyond food security to food sovereignty and technology sovereignty. The first question here identifies one of the major risks of artificial intelligence, but it frames it in a way that misses that a contradiction. By shaping what is seen, measured, and acted upon, artificial intelligence will be choosing and actually limiting the information we receive and influencing our decision-making abilities, whether those decisions are made by food producers, researchers, or policymakers. As a farmer, I can tell you that artificial intelligence cannot see and know the most important aspects of food production that a farmer can see, know, and understand. The knowledge of the land, the wind, the water flows, the plants, animals, and pollinators, as well as the pests, and in real time, as well as over seasons, over years, and over generations. The question also recognizes power imbalances. We should ask, do we have the political will to address the power structures that create these unfair conditions? If we are serious about ending hunger and food insecurity, we need to name and dismantle those power structures. I would like to point out that the forum's concept note references the strengthening collection and use of U.S. food FSN data policy recommendations. While those recommendations did have important aspects that need to be implemented, the CSIPM advocated for strong governance language in that document. But the final policy recommendations that were endorsed in 2023 contain weakened governance mechanisms as a result of the complex negotiation process. This forum is not a negotiation center. We are discussing things in a very coordinated effort, and I appreciate everyone's inputs today. But we do need to think of these policy recommendations but not as a strong basis for our governance considerations. CSIPM also agrees that the earlier points today regarding the framing of this forum and using the term harnessing is not as relevant and impactful as it would have been if it had been governance of artificial intelligence, digitalization, and data collection. I'll finally end by saying governance needs to be binding. It needs to include not just artificial intelligence, but also all of the digitalization and data technologies. It should ensure a rights-based focus with accountability to social and environmental impacts. And needs to include continuous reevaluation and reassessment of existing technologies, not just new ones. Thank you. In the second question, we're asked how to ensure that those most affected by the risks of AI technologies are involved. We would also want to ensure that those most affected are not harmed. So first of all, the CSIPM advocates for a pause or even a stop in the implementation of these technologies and uplift the precautionary principle. We need to name the risks, especially as we are experiencing the hyperscaling of artificial intelligence. The global South is especially vulnerable to these risks, but these risks are inherent and universal. They include biopiracy, land grabbing, extreme exploitation of labor, extreme exploitation of our natural environment, increased cost to the use of water, energy, and materials, surveillance, loss of privacy, and questions of data ownership. The loss of indigenous and traditional knowledge, especially for the sharing of this knowledge with future generations, is a real concern. These are serious risks to the future of humanity as these technologies and their infrastructure threaten to cross the threshold of planetary boundaries, increase the chaos of climate change, and eliminate and replace labor. There's also the concern about the enclosure of commons. Why isn't technology considered a common good? We're stripping away traditional rights, and is a concern for data colonization. These real and already existing risks are increasing migration, displacement, conflict, and hunger. We already have rights-based, proven frameworks that we need to draw on as we look to governance of artificial intelligence and digitalization. These include the indigenous people's right to free, prior, and informed consent, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and others working in rural areas, the care principles of indigenous data and knowledge and traditional knowledges, the collection and collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. And there are so many others. We don't need to start from scratch. The benefits of artificial intelligence and digitalization in our food system are not certain, even if we eventually have governance mechanisms in place. By placing them in this question as core infrastructures, it makes the assumption that they are neutral, necessary, and inevitable. But we must first consider the alternatives, including agroecology that has a well-documented benefit in regard to food security, food sovereignty, climate change, and biodiversity. The future of humanity and of our precious earth are at a crossroads. We need a vision of the future that recognizes our relationship to nature. We can exist without artificial intelligence. We cannot exist without what the earth provides us. Thank you.